Downing Street has just confirmed that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has tested positive for coronavirus. Boris Johnson has coronavirus. We don't know about the rest of his household or the whereabouts of his partner, Carrie Symonds, but Mr. Johnson has tested positive for coronavirus. We can speak to our correspondent in Westminster, Rob Powell. This comes at the time of day when the government briefs political reporters about what's going on, and Boris Johnson's got it.
Yeah, so this is a statement that's just been sent out from 10 Downing Street, literally in the last few minutes. A Downing Street spokesperson saying that the Prime Minister had been experiencing mild symptoms yesterday. He was tested for coronavirus on the personal advice of England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty. It goes on to say the test was carried out in number 10 by NHS staff and the result of the test was positive. So in keeping with the guidance, the Prime Minister is self-isolating in Downing Street, but is continuing to lead the government's response to coronavirus. Now, the Prime Minister has been having a meeting of his so-called war cabinet this morning. Now, we understand that we didn't see any ministers or any officials going into Downing Street this morning, and I think that was being held on a telephone conference call. We obviously saw him late last night at 8 p.m. last night outside the front of Downing Street, joining in the Clap for the Carers event. He was stood quite far away from the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, who was there as well. And I think what this Downing Street statement is at pains really to point out is that he still is in a position to lead the government's response to this pandemic outbreak. There had been talk about a week ago or so of who would take over if any of the critical people involved in this were to come down with coronavirus, with COVID-19, and were to be incapacitated to an extent that they wouldn't be able to lead that response. It seems from what Number 10 is saying here that actually Boris Johnson is just experiencing mild symptoms, so he may be able to work remotely from isolation in Downing Street and still lead that response. But I think it does beg questions about where the Prime Minister has...
Rob, we've just had a tweet from Boris Johnson which says that over the last 24 hours, I have developed mild symptoms and tested positive for coronavirus. I am now self-isolating, but I will continue to lead the government's response via video conference as we fight this virus. Together, we will beat this. Hashtag stay home, save lives. So that's Boris Johnson, a relatively cheery tweet, having tested positive for coronavirus.